Okay, good morning everyone. I think it is about time to put the headsets on and because we can't hear each other otherwise. Welcome to our panel on local content. We are all aware of the huge amounts of content that are being built every day. And if you ever search through the internet, what are the statistics, you would see that there are tens of hours of video materials uploaded every minute on YouTube. The Wikipedia has articles in hundreds of languages with an expanded use of mobile phones and mobile devices, and people are becoming the reporters and producing the content. This is becoming more and more relevant. Now, in most of the sessions at the IGF, usually we discussed, or in the past we used to be discussing the access in sense of the infrastructure and the availability of accessing the internet. But now we are trying to put an emphasis on something else, which is, why do we need that access? It's not going to work unless we have need in sense of services and in sense of content. So what we are going to try to discuss today is what are some of the good examples of production of content, local content and even services which drive the access and drive the development. We're going to hear a couple of examples around the world from business, from NGOs, from the governments, and we'll focus specifically, and I encourage all of you to get involved, not only with maybe your examples of what you know in your parts of the world, but also when it comes to the policy challenges that might be in place or that we might fight against, so that we can encourage local content production and local services. To start the session with, I will invite first Ambassador Philippa Viviette from the US State Department to set the stage in a brief introduction. Ambassador.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I've been looking forward to this since my friend Garland McCoy had suggested that I might be able to participate. This is a remarkably important subject, and I want to speak just very briefly about, at the highest level, about the policy-related issues and challenges that I think it presents. We're looking at the world for the moment in a very important way to look at it, which is from the demand side. As our moderator said, there's been a tendency over the years to look at internet-related questions from the supply side, to look at it from the standpoint of access. That's a very important perspective. But ultimately, I think it is more important to think about what it is that causes people to want to adopt the internet, to want to use the internet. We have discovered in the United States that even when it is available, we have a remarkably significant segment of our population that doesn't adopt it because it hasn't yet, that segment of the population, of using it. So the question becomes, what can we do to see to it that we have removed all obstacles to the use of the internet? And I think this is a particularly acute question in the context of languages and cultures that don't have large numbers of participants. If you are fortunate enough to have been a native English language speaker, or you are somebody who has learned English as a second language, this hasn't been a particularly serious obstacle. But if your first language is one that isn't widely spoken, if your culture isn't one that is widely known, widely adopted, it's absolutely essential as a policy matter to remove obstacles, any obstacles, to the ability to get content available in the appropriate language. And this means that we have, in this particular subject, as we do in almost all that involve the internet, a requirement to look very, very hard at this from the standpoint of efficiency. As a policy matter, we need to reduce the costs as much as possible to the use of the internet, and that includes the upload side of the internet as well as the download side. So I'm looking forward to the discussion of the examples where this sort of activity has been undertaken, but I do it with, I think, a realistic view that we have some very hard work ahead for a very long time in terms of trying to be sure that the advantages of the Internet are available to everybody on the planet. This is one of the main works that all of us who are friends of the Internet have to attend to in a serious way in the years ahead. So thank you very much for having me. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you for the chance to have you with us for the entire panel, because I hope there will be good discussions on the policy challenges and encouragements. Now, before we move to the panelists, unfortunately we have only one roaming microphone. It might be tricky to run around for this, what I want to do now, so we'll keep the microphone for later on. But if you have in mind that most of us use Internet for a couple of different things, let's say amusement, education, research, expression, communication, accessing information, what would you have as probably the first interest in accessing the Internet? May I ask you, how many of you would say that the amusement and entertainment would be the first reason of accessing the Internet? Can you raise your hands? Not that many. Let's go into the education. Well, that's even better. Research, expression, communication, and finally, let's say access to information every day. So I think this can be a good guidance for the content and service producers, what they should look for. Now, one of the excellent examples which comes from India is how do you make ordinary people to contribute, to report, to build their own content, especially among women, especially among young people. And then I'm very happy to have Subi Chaturvedi with us, who is from University of Delhi. And I was quite impressed when you started explaining what you do, and I had to stop you at some point because it was so many things. Can you enlighten us, what are you doing in India?
Okay, absolutely. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me on the panel. I can't thank our friend Garland enough for doing that. This is my first IGF, really, and it's been an overwhelming experience, and it's turned out to be everything that one thought that it would be. When I started out, there were impressions that it might just be a talk shop. I don't think that could be further from the truth. We're talking about values and core values of the Internet, and before I come to the India story, and I'll very quickly get to it, this has been an amazing enabling experience. It's been a platform that's put us all together, and everything that the Internet stands for, which is access, transparency, permissionless innovation, everything that you could look at, modularity, coming together, making our interventions, and no protocols in particular in place, TCP or IP notwithstanding. It's been an amazing experience. Where I'm coming from, like you said, it's not one thing but many. Several alter egos. I teach content needs a lot more push, and it's an uphill climb all the way. So what we managed to do, and that's my other avatar, so to speak. I'm also a documentary filmmaker, a photographer, and a curator, and I look at issues of freedom of speech and expression. One of the most important things that Professor Amartya Sen argues is the capabilities approach. If you're looking at an agricultural society, it is not going to automatically morph into a society that takes to technology. We have to become enablers and facilitators. So at my college, what I managed to do was put together a platform. It's called the saltlist.org, which looks at using young journalism and communication students to articulate issues that the mainstream media would leave out, because we have about 172,000 news dailies, about 400 daily news channels, and there are another 500 in the offing, and many more FM radio stations. So what tends to happen, and one of our journalist friends from Azerbaijan talked about it, it's a mild form, and when the he's coined a new term called autocracy 2.0. When you look at governments or mediascapes where you apparently see great proliferation of channels, you tend to assume that everything is well. And then the situation sort of sneaks up upon you when you realize there's not enough plurality in the discussion. There's actually homogenization of content. So what we decided to do was involve community video volunteers. We took technology to them and we engaged with the immediate surroundings and these young students who said, but when we look at newspapers, one of our concerns every day is, what is it new that you can do? Because this generation is wired and connected. So it's not about information, it's about being able to assimilate that information and make sense of it. We're clearly in the era of images and pictures. So a lot of it is about how do you pump them out to make sure that their debates are informed and they continue to ask the right questions. So this began as a small project. We involved the immediate community. They would take their smartphones and mobile phones. And one of the things that we do have is a mobile phone. You might not have access to clean drinking water. You might not even have access to a bathroom in your house, but you have the mobile phone. So in India, you have three kinds of literacy levels: the non-literate, the illiterate, the literate, and the keypad literate. So imagine a phone which has an English language capacity sending out texts in Russian. So our domestic helps, our vegetable sellers use these keypads. So these keypad literates, and this is really their first introduction to literacy, are using mobile phones to send out texts in Roman, typed out using the English language letters. And I couldn't agree more. Entertainment really has been one of the biggest drivers. So what Government of India managed to do many, many years ago was an experiment where they used Bollywood popular culture, Hindi music songs, to teach language and literacy. So these are, so the SALT list looks at issues that locals care about. It's hyper-local media at its best. Comes back to them, hands over these phones, and they all use phone cameras. They're taking pictures everywhere. They're taking orders for vegetables and deliveries, and tells them that you can do more with this device which is in your pocket and comment on these issues. So it's not just citizen journalism. It is community media, community video, community images, and community reflection. And that, I think, is as multi-stakeholder as we'll get. They choose their own issues. They decide what is it that they want to report on and what is it that they need more. But I would, and I don't know how much time do I have, or have I already run out? So I'm going to quickly wrap up on a couple of points. One of them is to drive local content, we need facilitators and we need enablers. And it's not just going to happen as a bottom-up approach. We will need a gentle push that's going to drive this content. We will also need vehicles of dissemination. It's a fantastic story because technology and democratization of technology has created a new user. This is the prosumer. There's a lot of user-generated content that you see from the producer and the consumer. We've now morphed into creators of content. We're active consumers of content, but unless we create a facilitating environment, and there I think the government has a huge role to play. So one of the success stories that I'm happy to share is the Indian Department of IT and Telecom engaged with academia, and those are the kind of participatory, facilitating partnerships that we could possibly look at and set up in a university a language center that now uses stories, books and texts and translates them into 11 languages across 9 universities in the country to create more content, especially for developing worlds, because one of the things that we tend to believe is here's this wonderful thing called the internet, and it's a great facilitator, but in digital inclusion, there's also digital exclusion. Whose voices are heard and whose voices we're leaving out? Those are some of the questions that I'd like to leave you with. Thank you for giving me the time and space.
Thank you, Subi. It's definitely just the beginning of your space today, because I have a number of questions, but I think we'll get back to... I'm always fascinated with the diversity of India and cultures and languages. I think we'll have to talk more about how to sustain some of these small languages and so on. But trying to map the field, we'll move to the next speaker from the local perspective of India and diversity and languages, we are moving to one of the biggest technical giants and companies, which is Microsoft. And well, usually when people mention Microsoft these days, it's more and more about cloud services and all these things. Dan Cvetkovic is with us from Microsoft. What do you do when it comes to the local content, even though you're a global company scattered around the world? What are your activities? How do you see it?
Good afternoon, everybody. Actually, good morning. For closed captioning, my name is Dan Cvetkovic, and I apologize for a bit of rough voice that I have this morning. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. Microsoft is a technology company, so I will be speaking about the tools as enablers for the local content development and access. We fundamentally believe that there are three things that drive the ecosystem around the internet. Number one, phenomenal explosion of devices. Number two, broadband and ever-increasing power of that broadband. But number three is really the back-end story, the entity that really deals with the computing power and with the storage power, and that's the cloud and the whole notion of cloud computing. So we fundamentally believe that the content is the umbrella for all of three, because the content drives the need for access, and then access drives the explosion of devices, growth of bandwidth, and the growth of the computing power at the back end. And the local content is fundamental for digital and social inclusion. So, because I would like to focus on the diversity and different flavors of the local content, I would like to focus on ease of development, number one, and ease of maintenance of that local content. Ease of development means that we as technology companies need to provide tools that are not only for engineers, not only for sophisticated application developers, but for everybody who wants to develop and access the content. And this is why, together with the industry, we focus on the concept of open data. And I will say why. Today, in the world, there's hundreds of thousands of personal computers, servers, devices, old computers, mainframes that hold dead public sector information, dead public information. Why do I say dead? That information is there in the digital form, but nobody's accessing it. With the cloud computing, we have the ability to use commonly adopted industry standards and interfaces to bring that data to the cloud and just to put it there in the cloud. And then encourage the content developers, application developers, people who know how to use simple tools to use that public data that is in the cloud and deliver all kinds of applications that can deliver the local content to the users. I will speak about two examples that we as a company did with our partners in the industry. The one application that I'm very proud of is the ionearth.eu. You can all go to the internet and access www.ionearth.eu. It's available for all European Union members. It's available for everybody in the world, but especially in European Union, in Europe countries, anybody can access the information about the quality of water, the quality of air, the quality of nature, climate in their countries. The other one that I want to mention is vanguide.com. It's the application that basically enables access to all of the information about what's going on in the city of Vancouver and how it is built. By taking that public information from dead servers across the city of Vancouver and putting it in a cloud, and then encouraging the application developers to develop all kinds of apps for iPhone, for Android, for Windows Phone, for iPad, for personal computer, for any kind of device that can access the internet. We bring that local content and we make that dead public sector information live for the users. In Europe, in European Union, there is a directive that basically states member states shall ensure that where the reuse of documents held by public sector bodies is allowed, these documents shall be reusable for commercial and non-commercial purpose. And in developing world, we really have the opportunity to learn the lessons from the environments like EU. Only in EU, the estimate is that the value of public sector information that can be used to develop the local content is 27 billion euros annually. And finally, I want to say that with the cloud computing, we really have the opportunity to do these things very fast, because cloud gives us the opportunity to use entirely outsourced infrastructure, computing power, software, maintenance in the data centers that we as users, we really don't care where those are. But with the tools for local content development and maintenance, we can develop the local content and consume it just like today we consume the electricity when we turn the switch on and we have the light and we don't really care where the hydro power plant is. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Very interesting. One of the things that you mentioned, I think, is very relevant, is the maintenance of the local content, which we usually forget about. It's about developing, but then someone really has to go on with that. But when you talk about cloud, there are two things, and examples that you mentioned are really excellent. I wonder if examples such as you mentioned for Vancouver and for Ion Earth could be developed in developing countries. Do they already have enough local or government data that could be used? And that's probably the question for all of you. And the second question or second concern which comes into my mind whenever we mention cloud is, of course, privacy and security. Any views on this correlation of privacy security in cloud with relation to local content? Dan.
Dan Cvetkovic again for closed captioning. It's a very good question. The main obstacles to the adoption of cloud computing in general is data sovereignty, data privacy, and data protection. And this is exactly why I like to use the concept of public sector information, public data, to put a foot in the door for cloud computing. Because indeed, for the local content development and for the social and digital inclusion, we talk about the public data. So in case of public data, there's really no concerns with regard to privacy and data sovereignty and data protection. So while obviously the whole industry does have the tools and the legal framework for data protection, in this specific case, we are fully free to use the power of the cloud because we are completely free to use public data the way that we want, because it's public. It's public and it's dead. Kept in local personal computers, servers, wherever it is. With the cloud, we can really make it public, available for content developers to make it public by delivering it to the users. And again, your remark about the ease of maintenance. The ease of maintenance is very high if we use the cloud because it's all in the data centers, managed, kept, and maintained by the people who are trained to do so. And it's fully outsourced. And I'm not advocating that we don't put those data centers in the developing countries because, you know, cloud and the internet is the major vehicle of the economic development. But first, let's use the existing data centers that are elsewhere in the world and use them to deliver the content to the developing world, because the developing world is the one that needs that data. And developing world is the one that is really hungry for digital inclusion and for the social inclusion. With regard to the question, do we really have enough content in developing world? We don't have enough content in the developed world because between those three pillars that I mentioned, devices, broadband, and the cloud, there's always a need for more and more services. And those services are then driving the content. And content is never enough. But there's always some to start with, start and spark the vicious circle and drive the demand generation by the usage of the existing local content, drive the demand generation by increasing usage of the content that we put as the public sector information. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Mark wanted to jump in on the local data. Mark Earl from UK government. Mark?
Yes, thank you, Vlad. Mark Arvo, UK Government, Department for Culture, Media and Sport. I just wanted to come in on this question about the public data, and the opportunity is truly exciting because certainly in the UK there's an enormous wealth of archived data from all the public services, all the ministries, all the government departments. And speaking as a civil servant, I can testify to the quality of that data and how well ordered it is and how easy it is to search, but it's largely untapped. And the cloud presents a great opportunity, and I'm sure the traditions of the British civil service have translated very effectively to many Commonwealth countries, developing countries, where I'm sure those data resources are going to be equally available and very useful for exactly the kind of applications we've just been talking about. Thank you.
I'll keep it really short. I must start by complimenting you, Mark. I looked at the Commonwealth IGF website. It's one of the nicest, cleanest, and easy and accessible portal possible. My second comment was just in addition to what Dean has been talking about in terms of cloud computing. One of them is the question on privacy. But knowing us Indians, we're the only market where daily newspapers are growing. They're proliferating. Everywhere else, there's been a crisis of traditional versus new media. So we're creatures of habit. One of the things that we don't do is we do not trust external spaces where we might not feel that we have the immediacy of holding it, touching it, and feeling it in our hard drive. So when you started out, you contextualized the debate by saying that access is not just about infrastructure. I couldn't agree more. To what end are we talking about in terms of enabling, facilitating environments? One of the other concerns becomes important then is not just we create content, we also need to drive people online by engaging with them in other public spaces. One of the learnings that I've had from the other workshops is the importance of public libraries in the UK, and that's another fascinating story that UK had to tell. But there are other public government institutions, when we visit them, if they could be engaged to just meet up with people and spread the word that cloud is not an evil thing that's going to dissipate when it's rough weather. So that, I think, becomes another important point of position. Thank you.
Thank you, Subi. Is there anyone of you in the audience, well, you're all together, that wants to give an example of from your countries? Is the public data available in your country, especially talking about developing countries? Is it digitalized? Is it somewhere stored? Can it be used? I see negative noddings, but I'm not sure. Can we get a microphone to the gentleman? Thank you. Just please introduce yourself for the captioning and for all of us.
Thank you. My name is Jimson Olufuye, and I just want to underscore that data is abundantly available, but in what format? In what format? So in developing nations, especially Nigeria, for example, There are a lot of data, but of course, in legacy, format and system, not basically electronic. But there is a major shift, to really convert this to electronic form. Recently, the government at the highest level made a decision that they're going to work on EDM, electronic document management, and capture all the data. So this is a huge decision. And that leads me to the investment opportunity that is available for a localization of data center. So, you need to take advantage of that, and that is key. Because if we were to say you want to locate data elsewhere, latency challenge is there. And of course, quick accessibility to this data is also of concern. So I think this is due to many other developing African countries. The opportunity is there. Also in Nigeria, the government has given good investment concession, like maybe up to even 5 years. Microsoft, Cisco, I think they're looking at that. So to be able to domesticate this utility, so to speak, like hydroelectric facility, for example. Well, it's good to have it anywhere, but of course, frankly speaking, it has to be close by and large in terms of jurisdictional issue. Jurisdictional issues also comes in the jurisdictional implication of data when it comes to legal matters and what have you. So that also underscores the need for such facility to be domesticated. And lastly, in Nigeria there's a huge amusement content, the Bollywood, the Nollywood in Nigeria. That is a huge content, which is really driving demand for content in Nigeria, so to speak. So there is need for broadband. So everybody is talking about broadband and broadband. So I think the challenge is with business. How can we come up to get these services, to the people? How can we get these services? So I think that is a major challenge for us, the business, to come in and take advantage of the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimson. Dan will respond also, but before that, we have another question, I think, or comment from that part of the table. And there was a question or comment from the remote participation, also for Microsoft, whether there are any particular services for Africa. Now, before giving you the floor, just to mention, since we are heating up the discussion, keep very short, 2 minutes if you can, please. Thank you.
I try, thank you. My name is Beatriz Busaniche. I'm from Argentina. I come from the free software community, so I have to strongly disagree with Microsoft's position here. But answering your question, I would like to say that, for example, in the city of Buenos Aires is now running a program on open government and open data. And they are putting a lot of data on a public website, and there's a lot of people developing applications to use that data. And the free software community in Buenos Aires is really committed to this development of applications. After doing this introduction, I would like to say that we cannot just separate content and infrastructure, because we need to empower the people also in dealing with the infrastructure. I think it's a very irresponsible position to just not pay attention of where my data is, or just thinking about, okay, it's easy, I will use this cloud service, I don't care where it is, as it is a really irresponsible idea to not pay attention to where energy comes if we care about environment. We just cannot forget that we have to pay attention to these issues in this moment of history. So I think we have to talk about local content, but also we have to talk about local infrastructure and how do we deal with local infrastructure and how we empower our communities to run their own servers. Running a mail server is an easy thing, and you just don't need a huge data center to run a local mail server, for example. And that is something good for privacy and for human rights advocates and all the other people working there with with this kind of technologies. Just to put an example, in Argentina we have a project called USLA, which is, I don't know if someone speaks Spanish here, but it means usuarios de software libre in Argentina, free software users in Argentina. One of the goals of this project is to develop and to have our own infrastructure, so we don't have to use the infrastructure provided by other sectors. So we can control our infrastructure. So please do not separate content and infrastructure, because if we want to be independent, if we want to be sovereign, if we really want to understand technology, first we need to understand how it works, and we cannot understand it if we cannot build it, as Richard Feynman said once in his life. So I would like to call your attention on the importance of paying a lot of attention. It's not just content there, I will produce something and I don't care where it is. We have to care where it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we can't agree more than these two are absolutely interrelated. With this purpose, since we have a limited time for discussions, we organized 2 workshops. The previous one was yesterday on exactly on local data, localization of data. Today we are focusing on the content, but you're absolutely right on that. I'll keep that question, if you don't mind, for the next part, and I'll close this part with a short comment from Dan, and I noted, so give back later.
Dan Svetkovic for closed captioning. The question with regard to the data format is an excellent question, and I would like to emphasize the importance of interoperability here, because with the concept of interoperability, it is the only way to reuse that public sector information that is dead and to make it alive through the cloud computing. And the way to do it is, as I mentioned, using the interfaces that are based on commonly adopted industry standards, such as XML. Hence, the industry supports the open data notion with the software that is called OGDI. Microsoft fully supports it. It's free. It's open source. You can search it over the internet. And the idea of this open source software is to enable application developers to map the legacy format that is on the local machines to an XML format and put it in a cloud and make it available for everybody worldwide, totally free, to use that data and deliver the local content. So again, this is the idea of bringing public sector information to the cloud, using it to deliver the local content and drive the access. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. We want to hear a couple of more examples, and I'm moving now to Kristin Pettersson, who is from Invenel, and she has been involved a lot with community work in Haiti, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and so on. But I think we are going to hear about a couple of examples from Uganda and Africa about not only the content, but the services or the way people use and why they use it in different circumstances. Kristin.
Okay, thank you so much for having me here today. My organization is called Invenio, and we're focused on getting the tools of technology, sustainable computing, and better access to broadband out to people and communities and regions that need it most. As you can imagine, that we've worked in about 25 countries in some of the most marginalized and underserved communities across the developing world. It's our approach to use technology to enable organizations and communities to transform their lives through better access to education, healthcare, economic opportunity, and relief. But technology is not enough, and that's why I'm here to talk about content today. Technology is only useful when it's useful. And so that means driving relevance through better access to content. And the best access of content is locally relevant and locally developed content, because it has the ability to engage and to inform and engage people to become a part of the technology solution. So I've been asked to share with you an example, a unique example of how access and local content development and local services development are coming together to enable affordable access and regional development. We've worked in Uganda for a number of years. In fact, that's where my organization started our work. And in particular, we've been working in the north. The north, for the last 5 years, has had a reasonably peaceful existence. But prior to that, there were more than 20 years of fighting between Uganda and the Lord's Resistance Army. What that did to the north is, in and around Gulu, is it became separated. It became completely, almost digitally disconnected, and fundamentally disconnected both from Uganda and the rest of the world. And so access to technology in this area not only is important for information, but it can literally change people's lives. We're working on a unique program with 3 other organizations. As Vlad mentioned, we're the technology organization, but 3 additional organizations are coming together to ensure that local content is available and that access is affordable. First, the program is called Internet Now, and it's led by Oxfam. And the idea is that access to the internet can drive jobs and can drive information. The other 2 organizations beyond Invenio that are participating are an organization called ALAN. And ALAN stands for Arid Lands Information Network. They have a long history in Eastern Africa of developing local community centers through use of technology, where they bring together experts and local practices around farming and agriculture to enable community members, one, to participate and learn, but also to drive that information that they know into the broader region. They have had a few centers. They started in Kenya, but they've had a few centers funded by Oxfam over the last few years in northern Uganda to test out how that model might be used in northern Uganda. Another organization that's coming together is a group called Samosource, who does micro work and who brings the ability to do micro work over the internet to local communities. So first, let me talk about the localization of the content. With the war, people were displaced for over 20 years. They not only lost their land, but they lost their skills, their agriculture, their farming skills, which is what over 90% of the people, 90% of the people depend on. They're subsistence farmers, and so the project with Alan is to deliver. Well, the overall project is to deliver 100 centers over the next 3 years. The first center is being launched. The first official center is being launched next month. These centers use a combination of information access online, which has been developed in Kenya and will start to be developed in northern Uganda by the local people as well as local experts. But it also takes an online-offline approach because access isn't simple. The issues are not only ability to use technology, but the issues are language, and the issues are the ability to read. And so they take that information and create groups that engage and complete that circle by transferring information out and bringing back information back into the internet, and look at how practices and new technologies like access to market information and services can really change people's farming techniques and habits. The second and really interesting piece to this project is that these 100 centers not only will be centers for agricultural information, which is really critical to the majority of the population, but they will also be opportunities to use technology to learn 21st century skills and to do jobs, microwork jobs. Samasource uses a platform to distribute jobs from microwork from all over the world. It could be from Microsoft, it could be from Google, it could be from any one of these, or Disney, any one of these organizations sitting here today, and allows those tasks to be driven into rural communities. And they teach and teach those community members how to perform these tasks and enable them to start to build a living using these tasks in their own communities. So not only, one of the biggest issues around the places we work is not just content, but access. And I know this session isn't about access, but access has to be affordable. And so this is building a business model in with a content model to maximize the ability to deliver economic and community development all in one. And so with that, I'd like to say that there are many models. And as soon as this model is implemented, what I'd be remiss to say is there's so many ways for content to be developed in country for the countries that it needs to serve, that this model is just waiting for a number of the universities and the iHub and the internet hub, the application hubs and application labs to develop more and more that can get into their hands. And so I think that we need to really focus on not just innovative models like this, which take a long time and a lot of investment, but let's look at how we can leverage the resources in the countries where we work and where the skills are to really accelerate access to local data and local content and local information. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. It's really a pleasure looking at you while you're speaking about this with a big smile, and I can only imagine what a pleasure it is to be on the spot and really do these things. I guess this is also the invitation for the others to connect somehow with them, yes, and deliver even more of that, right? We'll get back to that definitely. We're jumping from Uganda over India to Caribbean, and we have Bevel Wooding, who is the founder of Breitbart Foundation, which is an international NGO focused on local capacity, on education, on digital content. And we are making a link now with the infrastructure as well. Bevel.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bevel Wooding. I actually like...
It's not working yet.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Bevel Wooding. And this is a very, very interesting discussion. A number of the areas that I work in are actually connected to what we're talking about. One of the hats I wear is for another NGO called Packet Clearinghouse, which focuses on the infrastructure aspect of internet access in countries, particularly in emerging markets. And while we promote and help countries develop internet exchange points, what we always find is that that only helps so much. Unless you have content, these facilities are useless. And so the big question mark that is always asked is, so if I build out my infrastructure, how can I guarantee that content is created? And that's where the Breitbart Foundation initiative that I want to focus on this morning starts to answer or address some of those questions. What we have done in the Caribbean as part of a wider ICT, or Information and Communication Technology outreach program, is we've developed a number of digital content creation programs. And these programs are run in a unique way. As an international NGO, we develop the material, the content, and we focus on ICT in education, we focus on public awareness, cyber security, safety for parents, for students, but we also focus on life skills, and that's how the values-based dimension of content connects to its social development aspects. Our emphasis is on the youth and on getting more girls in particular out using technology and using technology tools. But the programs have drawn the wide cross-section of society. We have adults as well as young people coming into these programs. And the emphasis is not specifically on giving technical skills only, but on allowing people to understand how content development is linked to some of the challenges of access and some of the challenges of policy. So all of our initiatives have this component where we talk about the ecosystem. So if you're coming wanting to find out about how to build mobile apps or how to develop a podcast or do online broadcasting, we start with an understanding of what are the different elements necessary to make that happen. And we found that that has been a remarkably successful way of introducing people not just to the areas that they have natural interest in, but to giving them an understanding of the role they must play, particularly in markets and environments where the ecosystem is not always as healthy as it should be, the role that they can play in making a difference and making change by advocating for the kinds of support that they need. So some of the initiatives that we have, one is called the ICANN program, or not ICANN, the domain name body, but ICANN as in initiative for creating content that empowers nations. So we call it ICANN, and it's I can design, I can code, I can change my world. And that's the tagline that we use to help people understand what we're going for. And I'm sharing that because when we put out some of these programs, you get the expected interest in, I want to know how to build mobile apps. But people do that from the standpoint of, well, I personally want to know how to build mobile apps. And we try to shift the platform to, if you build it along with other people, then you can actually create a mobile app revolution in your community, in your city, or in your country that makes it better for you to do the thing that you're interested in. And so we create this public or social consciousness as part of the delivery of the material. Another aspect that we focus on inside of these content creation programs is the role of open data. Part of what I have found as director of the ICT Roadshow in the Caribbean is that you have different groups looking at things that are important to them, but very seldom you find connections between initiatives. So we had an open data initiative in the region, but nobody was talking infrastructure that is necessary to support all of these new data sets that governments can put out. And nobody was engaging the application developers who you need to have activated to take advantage of the open data. So part of what we do is in producing our material, we always try in the forward to have multi-stakeholder approaches. I know it's an overused term, but it's an important aspect of how this all works. And the emphasis is on creating real relationships between people. Not just talking about abstract 3-letter or 4-letter acronym organizations, but actually having people meet each other and say, you're in open data, you're in infrastructure, you're an app developer, you need to talk to these people about opening their data. Because the policymakers, we found, if you just approach them and say open data is important and it's happening around the world and you need to do it, they'll say like, but we have other things that are more important. But if you link it to education, and if you link it to broadband initiatives, and if you link it to infrastructure rollout, and if you link it to policy changes, then it starts to attract their attention in a different way. And so in constructing our programs, we try to make sure that we don't just have training initiatives, but we have real collaborative type settings that go beyond a 2-day or 4-day workshop, so that any material that we leave on the ground will be left in the hands of a similarly excited and similarly invested local NGO, so that they can take that and continue to build on it. And I want to give a practical example of that with the digital publishing training that we do. We focus on the usual things: ebooks, podcasts, digital photography. But what we try to do is work always with either the Ministry of Education or Social Development in the territory to allow them to identify in the schools people who have an interest in writing, not necessarily an interest in digital publishing. And so we link teachers with people who have a literary or photography background with the digital content program. And that way we ensure that it doesn't stay inside of the hands of just a self-interested person, but that it can form part of the education syllabus or changes to the curriculum. And this has worked so well that the regional examination body, the Caribbean Examination Council, CXC, has approached us about creating specific coursework now for the secondary schools, official curriculum material based on these short courses that we ran. And so you see the impact that it can actually have on how learning is conducted and how it makes more culturally relevant content available now through the formal education systems. And that's very important for us because we know that some of the technology can be like a fad that comes and goes, but there are aspects of digital training that are important to keep going well beyond what the current technology flavor of the day is. The other aspect that we're now working on, this is not as fully fleshed out as the training material, is what we're calling our bright spots. We're Bright Path Foundation, so we created something called Bright Spots, which are hubs for local content development. And this is where we're working using some of the very successful models that already exist, for example, in Kenya, where you have these communities of interest being developed. And we're linking government with private sector, with civil society, to create these spaces where people who are excited by the programs that we conduct can continue to go and find a place where there is internet access, where there is appropriate facilities. And this is something that we're piloting now in the nation of Antigua and Barbuda. And it's working very well, where the organization responsible for investment and tourism is actually helping establish in their facilities rooms where young people who have taken some of the mobile application workshops can go in and just continue to meet and continue to flesh out their ideas with, of course, proper access to proper broadband connectivity, which is not always widely available in some of these countries. And the other aspect of what we're doing connected to that is creating an online content library where the training programs that we've done can be accessed by the countries that want to have access to these short programs. And in doing that, we are allowing the young people who are participants to be the producers of that material, so that they immediately see the connection between the training that they're receiving and how it can actually practically be used to change content that is available both on national television and on national radio. And of course, this creates a fair amount of excitement when young people see their programs on air or online. And it helps to create that momentum that is so important within country. With that, I'll hand you back over to the moderator.
Thank you, and for excellent examples, and also for one additional note, which is a mobile apps, which is probably becoming one of the most important drivers of the access and interest of the users. After all, moving on again on a different scale, and talking about the quality content, something completely different from, well, not that completely different from local. Yeah, sure.
I just forgot to mention this, which is another interesting development. What we've done in the Caribbean has been so impactful that we actually been asked to go to Fiji, the Pacific Islands, to conduct a similar program. And what it said to me when I got the invitation was that these are initiatives that are very portable. And the models that are being adopted, they're not small island or developing country. These same programs, we're running them in the city of Hackney in the UK. We're running them in a small town in Arkansas called the Queens. It's programs that any community that wants to be more digitally connected and wants to have more relevant local content can use. And I just thought that's an interesting take on what was said earlier about how material developed can have so many extrapolated benefits when you get the models correct. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't know, Thomas Spiller from Disney. I don't know if you, Disney, have gone also to Caribbean and Fiji, and I'm sure you have, even though we used to watch you on the TVs. But I'm sure that you're doing much more in facilitating the production of the local content on all these small islands.
Thanks, Vada, and thanks for having me here. I will be very brief. Yes, and indeed I will focus my remarks on creativity and quality content, because as you said, and most of you know, we have been in the business of providing that type of content for like 70 years, in particular to kids, of course. Subi, you made a very interesting point. You said, and I quote you, and I'm trying to quote you, is that entertainment is one of the major ways to drive digital take-up. That's basically what you said. And I cannot but agree with that. What we are seeing is a huge appetite in emerging economies for what we call premium or quality content, developed locally, according to local taste and culture and traditions. And that's something we're seeing from Nigeria, and Jimson, who was over there, my colleague, has talked about Nollywood, in India, of course, Indonesia, everywhere. But I want to throw two words into the discussion. The first one is creativity. It's all about telling a good story that people, and kids in particular, in our case, can relate to. And if you put a little, funny mouse in front of a kid, wherever in the world, the kid will interact and create its own world and own stories. There is no limit to that creativity. Kids are kids everywhere in the world, and that's quite fantastic to see. So that's why, from a Disney perspective, we are involving in local content production in local language as well, in places like Turkey, like Latin America, like Russia, and like China soon, and soon as well in Indonesia, because again it's based on the Disney storytelling traditions, but with local ways of doing it, which is sometimes a bit different. And that's very important. I would also add that on top of this, of course, we need infrastructure. That obviously we are not in that business as Disney, but technologies and new ways of doing business like cloud can definitely help. I just want to add also another point, and I'm coming back to Nollywood here. We all know Bollywood. Of course, we all know Hollywood in the US, we all know Bollywood in India, but Nollywood might not be that well known, and it's the Nigerian film industry, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, industry for producing digital movies in the world. Actually, they are right behind Bollywood, right behind Bollywood. Having said that, what is from a business perspective, and I would like also to throw that into the discussion, Jimson mentioned that as well, but there is the importance of having the right infrastructure for local business to develop with like legal certainty and rule of law, so they can actually, go to the next step. Because it's very nice to have like dancing cats on the internet, but that's pretty limited. I mean, after like the 5,000 dancing cat, well, it's still a dancing cat. You see what I'm saying? If you really want to go to the next step of development and actually grow locally, or in the case of Nigeria, to also tap into the Nigerian diaspora around the world, you need that kind of infrastructure, technical infrastructure, but also legal and economic infrastructure where the rule of law aspect comes into play. And that's where in countries, in Indonesia, for instance, when the take-up of mobile phone, or India, within the young population is huge, there is a phenomenal market here for companies to invest. And again, the key for us is the production of local content in local countries with local tradition and values. But and I'll stop there. But my main point is about storytelling. If you tell a good story, people will watch it in every culture, in every language. And don't forget how creative people are, and kids in particular. If you give them the tools to develop their own imagination and their own world, you will be very surprised what they can do. And we are seeing that in the Disney environment around the world, and that's only the beginning. We are looking at new markets now, and we are very surprised in very positive ways by what kids can create on their own. You just give them the tools, and the creativity will come. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. This links amazingly well between what Thomas and you said before. Both are based on creativity. One is quite on a different sphere than the other one, but it's based on creativity and engaging people. Let me invite you at this point, before we turn into the policy challenges, and I'll probably cause some discussions also. Any examples or comments from any one of you regarding cases of local content or activities in your countries? Anyone would like to give an example? Or should we move straight forward? Remote participation.
Actually, there are three questions from remote participation. Should I sound all of them? Yes. So the first one is from Daco Gabriel from ISOC Cameroon Hub. It's asked to Dejan Cvetkovic from Microsoft. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Does your enterprise have some project on producing local content in Africa?
You can read all three of them.
So the second one is also from Daco Gabriel. There are panelists who talk about cloud computing and some issues like security and privacy. But what about the access to this content? I think that this service needs good bandwidth. Do you really think that cloud computing can be a good solution to the problem of local content for developing countries? For example, in the country of Daco, the cost of 1 megabyte per second is average $350 per month. And also the third question from Ridona Kajmaku, Albania, personal interest. In Albania, which is a developing country, open data is a project that has been lately implemented to make possible public data. Since it's very new, it doesn't provide much archives of previous data, but very few people know about it. So I would also like to ask, is this an issue as well? That's all, thank you.
Thank you. Since we are moving into the policy part where we are going to touch again upon bandwidth and public data, I would leave there and maybe to respond to the first one regarding maybe specific activities of Microsoft in Africa, and then we'll later on catch up with the other two questions.
The answer at question for closed captioning. Well, obviously we do have huge operations in Africa with regards to the open data projects. I'd like to remind that Microsoft is a technology company. We provide the platform, infrastructure, and the tools, and we leave to our partners to develop the solutions. There are a number of open data projects that are taking place in Africa and that are done by the independent software vendor solution providers that use open data and OGDI to deliver the solutions for Africa. And I would again like to re-emphasize the concept and the power of cloud, the concept that really breaks the borders, that crushes the borders, and that really lets both the developers, solution providers, and consumers manipulate the data, the public data. I want to re-emphasize the concept of public data, no matter where they are and no matter where the data center is, and let the content users to use that local data. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. Bevan?
All right, just quickly to respond to one of the questions made, and to link it to what Thomas was saying about creativity. At the workshops that we have had, we normally invite government ministers and in accelerating policy transformation decisions, because it provides a real-world connection between the sometimes theoretic promise of infrastructure investment and content investment and what they're now seeing directly as lives being changed. And I just wanted to make that point because it is something that is not normally looked at as a strategy for engaging policymakers, but if you allow them to see the impact that these kinds of local content initiatives have on young people, and in particular, it does provide a profound point of reference for policy making.
Just to take the point further on creativity, a lot of local content, and especially content in developing countries, one of my pet peeves has been it's a torture. To just sit there and suffer that content, and also ask children and parents. It's top down, it's downright preachy, and it's God awful. So I couldn't agree more with Thomas, and you hear when you say that creativity is such an important part. A lot of my life choices, and I would drag my parents to hotels just because in their lobbies they would have Tom and Jerry and they would have Mickey Mouse, and that is what informed my life choices. One of the success stories that I did want to share was the US Secretary of State was kind enough to facilitate, and this is where public diplomacy and engagements across governments and countries come through. So I think one of the most successful exports to the world anywhere has been the Disney franchise and The Simpsons. So in India, what we have is something that's called Gully Gully Simpson, which is an adaptation of The Simpsons, which the Secretary of State was kind enough to facilitate. And it's been a fantastic story using puppetry, using local, very local and very relatable identity issues and stereotypes, and it works beautifully. You have children eating out of your hands, and you don't even have to tell them that taking a bath or having clean nails is important. So I think creativity is really the king as far as content and local content is concerned. Thank you.
Well, who would think that one can link public diplomacy and creativity? Usually creativity should come without policy, but there are other things regarding policy, and I took a couple of notes: costs of access and the infrastructure available, and localization of data, and security and privacy. Mark Harwell and Imad Hobalach are there on government's behalf. What are your perspectives, Mark?
Thanks very much, Vlada. This is indeed, as the ambassador said in his opening remarks, a very important area for policymakers. And I know we've got, I haven't got much time, but I think I would just focus on three elements, really, of key interest for policymakers, certainly for the UK government, and I know for many others too, both developed country governments and developing countries. First of all, infrastructure, as you just mentioned. it's important for policy to help stimulate the kind of commercial investment that's going to roll out the high-speed networks that content providers and users require. And we have a problem in the UK with that. We're now committed to funding of something like £500 million from the government in order to stimulate the kind of commercial investment that's necessary to deliver high-speed broadband in rural areas where that commercial incentive is not there. So we have to work with the industry in order to extend high-speed broadband into rural areas, into rural communities, so that users and people developing services who are resident in rural areas can actually use the networks effectively. We're also investing in super connected cities, and I'm sure this is an objective for many governments and city authorities to transform their city economies into ones which truly reflect the digital age. And we're also investing money in improving mobile coverage in the UK, where we still have problems with poor or non-existent mobile coverage in rural and remote areas. So infrastructure side, very, very important part of policy. Secondly, with regard to stimulating the creative content sector, I guess we, in the UK, and this may provide examples for others to follow, we look to, first of all, public service broadcasting. BBC has a very important role in representing the different communities and regions, even language communities within the UK, and ensuring that those communities and the people who live in those communities, who work in those communities, are able to interact and share experience and so on. So the kind of digital services that the BBC provides, in addition to traditional television, is very important. Secondly, we're very supportive of our creative sector, in particular our high-end TV producers, high-end meaning quality drama and quality comedy and so on, not the other sort of quiz shows and things. We're not so concerned about those. They're popular anyway. But we support that high-end TV sector, the video game sector. We support, and this is very important, really, as both ensuring that this sector, which is already very strong in the UK, but is one which continues to expand, to provide opportunities for creators, for designers, for people providing content, and also it's a stimulus to the economy, because this sector is incredibly important to the economy. We're in economic downturn, so the government policy really, its growth policy to get us out of the problems we're in, is really to invest in those sectors. And what we're doing is providing kind of corporate tax relief framework. We've just gone out to consultation on that to assist the producers, the creators in those sectors. I didn't mention animation. Animation was the third one. Video games, high-end TV, and animation. So we're providing assistance and support for those particular sectors. Thirdly, I just wanted to touch on international issues where policymakers are coming together in multi-stakeholder fora like this, but also in other multilateral fora like the ITU. Bevel mentioned internet exchange points. We've fought long and hard in the ITU for promoting the development of internet exchange points, because they do two things. They bring costs down, but also they stimulate local content, and that's critical for the development of the digital sectors in countries. And we're seeing results of that in Kenya and also Nigeria with the development of internet exchange points. But there was a lot of resistance to that by many ITU members protecting their monopoly telcos, who saw them as a threat. So we, the UK, have been, engaged and fighting hard for liberalising markets and allowing the development of internet exchange points. I also sit on the other ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers in the GAC, and there we are really pushing hard for multilingualism. This is an important aspect of the development of content, the development of kind of services that we've talked about in the context of Uganda and so on. You need the internet, the domain name system needs to be multilingual. It needs to be in non-Latin scripts, and we, the UK, have really been pushing hard for that. So 3 sort of areas: our own sort of infrastructural issues, where they are directly related to content, as our contributor from Argentina pointed out very succinctly early on, in stimulating and supporting the content sector and working internationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Viviette?
Thanks. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be in Baku, part of the IGF, with this impressive group of panelists. Thanks, Garland. Relevant content in general is created by individual users, and access and content are intertwined and interdependent. There has been a steady growth in the region, the Arab region in general. There has been a steady growth of penetration, access penetration, to the point where the percentage is about 75%. It's amazing that in some countries it's 200% and above. However, content has not kept up to the technological progress and the needs of the regions or the citizens. I'm not going to be a typical government person when I'm talking today. I'm going to bring up a couple issues that are typical, everybody bring up, but I'm going to probably talk about some taboo issues. And so you have to bear with me. So there are many examples of simple local content driving access in the region. Example, the political events that everybody has heard about in the Arab world promoting real-time, uncensored user content or user-created content, in addition to the proliferation of production tools for the creation of user-created content. And we've seen the Arabization of some social networks like Facebook and Twitter, and the Arabization and customization of sites, contents, references, and digital libraries throughout the region. Just a couple of examples from Egypt. When the Arabic version of Facebook was launched in March 2009, the number of users jumped from 822,000 to 3.5 million in 2 years, which led to more internet consumption and access level. Political change in the Arab countries is leading the growth in social network adoption. Again, back to Egypt. In 2011, political events resulted in unprecedented rise in the use of internet to access real-time, uncensored user-generated content. Egypt gained 632,000 new Facebook users in January and February alone in 2011. On February 1, 2011 alone, the day the past government turned the internet back on, Egypt gained 100,000 new Facebook users. Moreover, Twitter adoption grew tenfold in January 2011, and tweets also grew tenfold to over 1 million between January 24th and January 30th, despite the closure of major ISPs. We also see the spread of documentation centers, incubators by government, Arabic portals, digital cities, digital libraries, and the list goes on. Yet, there are major challenges facing digital content creation and documentation and dissemination. Mainly, actually, we have very limited national and regional initiatives. No matter how many we mention, they're very limited. Access of skilled personnel, or access to skilled personnel, is limited. And training and education, in addition to security concerns, at least the way it's being viewed by people, by users for online transactions, and the quality of local websites and local versions of international websites. These are issues. I'm going to move on to talking about the emerging technological advances and the interest among the tech-savvy Arab youth, as demonstrated through the Arab Spring, are driving businesses and government to invest, but not enough. The efforts of the Arab governments could be described as shy and inhibited. At best, if we do not go with what even some people say, they are even inhibiting. Some of our government's efforts are inhibiting. Some should even question if this is related to some government's concerns about responsible freedom of their citizens and how to cope or handle what the citizens really want and need. I told you I would not be a typical government person. They, without a doubt, require a voice, I mean the citizens, a vote in their future and being able to make a difference in how they are governed. The issue for many, I'm not going to mention who those many are, regional internet development is not viewed as only a technological change, not as a minor social change, and not as a simple multi-stakeholder gathering, but rather as a social transformation, a cultural transformation, and above all, to governing leadership at least, may be viewed as a political transformation. They see it as trying to give away on the internet what they will not give away off the internet. And that's a major inhibitor, believe it or not. The question is, how do we proceed while working with everyone to encourage a smooth, beneficial, and successful digital knowledge transition for the benefit of the population? We need to work around the backlash. Believe it or not, the Arab Spring has created a backlash in the Arab world with some governments. They're even going to cut off lots of things. Especially for some people who see the IGF, and this some of you may not like, not only as an internet governance forum, but they see the internet as a governance forum. Traffic trends in the Arab region are, and as expected, similar to those trends in other regions. Facebook, Google, YouTube, entertainment, Twitter, with video streaming at the top of the heap from an overall bandwidth usage. I'm not going to get into the telcos issue and how the telcos now are trying to get into the content, because they're going to be a major helper in getting the content throughout. Most content is user-created, and people usually access content that is relevant to them. Local content, or better yet, community content, a type of content that is relevant to their lives and addresses the need of a community of interest. While Arabic content continue to face inhibitors and barriers such as the popularity and usage of English language sites, low IT literacy, increasing but low broadband internet user levels, and let us not forget, and it's not mentioned that often, a high level of illiteracy in the area that could border 30 to 35%. That is not usually talked about. We need to make sure that we have literate users, literate in all what the whole meaning of the word. And we need to make sure that we drive for real change. In addition to the private sector, governments will likely be a key in making Arabic content available on the web. Government and policymakers must take actions to face these challenges and promote development and consumption of local content. And we could talk about what Mark talked about, speeding up a robust, high bandwidth infrastructure. It's got to be there. You got to get the access. Without the access, you're not going to benefit from the content. If you don't have the content, you're not going to feel like you need the access, and so on and so forth. So they're intertwined. The markets must be totally and effectively open for real competition. I personally don't see, even though with the high level of penetration, real competition in many of our countries that are on the top level of competition in the area. Because the governments probably own most of them directly or indirectly. Governments and regulators must lighten up their regulatory framework and implement spectrum policy that encourage investments and open the airwaves for advanced offerings. Governments must address and eradicate illiteracy in general and ICT in particular. For policymakers, it really goes all the way. The policymakers, the teachers, the students, the employees, the educators, the farmers, etc. You know, we have probably, I believe, 60% of our community still doesn't get any kind of access, even though the penetration is 75%. Government must also enhance the education system. I would call for what it is called devicify and ICTize teachers, environment, and investing in schools. Everybody should have a device. Everybody should be ICT literate. It is a must that governments encourage and support young entrepreneurs by promoting industry clusters and by offering tax exemption on exports of digital content and services and minimizing, if not eliminating, taxes and levy. They're working with incubators, innovators, etc. They encourage innovation and creativity. For e-transactions, our government must partner and collaborate with the private sector to have a secure and reliable cloud. Because it is an inhibitor. People don't trust it all the time, so you gotta get them to trust it more. There must be some intermediary step there. Digital technology is increasing expectation of transparency and accountability from government bodies and officials, and expectations of improved public services, including e-government services. E-government must be more than an entry point and should become a place for free citizens to express, to engage, and produce as he or she wants and uses it as a platform for representation, transparency, and accountability. It must be accompanied by proper e-laws. We don't have proper e-laws. We don't have the proper judicial system to deal with the new environment while engaging the youth, the women, and the civil societies. Final word related to the challenge to the internet community. Because we really have a challenge for the internet community, and that is, it is the responsibility of everyone to try to help ease this transition. They cannot get into a wicked fight, wicked fight, because all what it does, it just takes people into backlash about the citizens. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Imad. I think I took a lot of notes, and I think you're really good. We could just copy-paste most of your suggestions. To finalize, I'll just extract a couple of key words from this session. What we need facilitators and enablers. We need vehicle of dissemination of the content for drivers, their devices, broadband, storage and cloud, entertainment, creativity. As opportunities, we can see open data, we see mobile applications, social networks, and out of policy issues, we can mention infrastructure, costs, public service broadcasting role, security, privacy, localization of that data, work in the international fora, multilingualism, literacy in education, taxation, e-government, e-laws, and I think the list does not stop here. I want to thank all of you for coming and for your patience. We did break a little bit, but we were late. Thank you for coming, and we'll continue with this. Thank you.